Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us today in Design Talk today with architect Arian Hakimi entitled Rethinking Modularities. Architect Arian.
Hello, Mohammed. Hello from Tehran, and hello,
Thank,
people from the world.
Thanks for accepting our invitation, and we're glad having you today and looking forward.
Okay, thank you very much. So just give me 1 second so that I will share my screen. Okay, can you confirm you are hearing okay and you can see my screen?
Yes, go
Okay.
ahead. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So hello again. My name is Arian Hakimi, and today I will be talking about this design methodology that I've been developing and the type of practice that I have been conducting recently. If I'm going to start from my own background, I studied architecture in India in 2005, and then I transferred to the University of Tehran. I finished my bachelor in 2010, and basically right after graduation, I signed up for IaaC master program. It was a dual master program. The first one was about implementing parametric design in urban typologies. And the second one, which was very interesting and had a huge impact in my career, was about this bottom-up design system. And 1 year after graduation, I basically joined Zaha Hadid office in London from 2013 until September 2021, around 8 years. I was engaged in more than 20 projects in various building typologies, from interior design to gigantic or Acropolis style master plans, infrastructure. One of them was this competition, which was redesigning the entire Riyadh transportation system. I guess it was about 150 metro overground stations, bus stations, train stations, ferry stations. Again, the Red Sea Maritime Museum, some master plans in China and interior in Russia, educational, such as the extension of the Juki Hong Kong Polytechnic University, a master plan, couple of master plans in China. This one is in Shenzhen, and a new science center in Singapore. And again, master plans, mega buildings, office buildings, residentials, just going through very fast. But out of those projects, there are two projects that has been built. One of them is the KF. We call them KFD, but Mohammed just said Kafta, and I think Kafta is the right pronunciation. So it's a train station in Riyadh, one of the unique one in the world. And as you can notice, the viaducts or the railways are not at the ground, but they are elevated through these bridges. And I was responsible for the die-grid facade systems, external facade, and as well as the interior part. As you can see, it's one of the very unique and sophisticated projects that I was ever engaged. Every single item here are double curved. Regarding the fabricational standpoint. And the external panels are UHPC, which is ultra high performance concrete. Almost each panel it weighs about a ton, and they are 1.5 meter deep. The second project that I was involved, which is also built, is a master plan in Chengdu, in Sichuan state. The Unicorn Island Master Plan, and the unicorn here refers to the fact that there are very few startups that within 10 years of their existence, they can hit $1 billion in assets or in capital. And since that phenomenon happens very rarely, they call them unicorn. The GFA of this project is around 1.5 to 2 million meters square. And as you can see how close basically the vision, the architectural design vision with the reality and execution, you can see that how close they are. It was very, very interesting experiences doing Chinese project. And this is another one. This is another view. So for this specific project, I was responsible for the initial rationalization of the entire master plan and the building, the startup building. From the concept to the full handing over the project, it took about 2 years, which during that time it broke a record in terms of being designed and built somehow modus operandi. To give you a sort of a background, on Monday, we used to send very precise NURBS surfaces or geometries models to the contractor. And whenever we asked them, like, okay, guys, have you seen our drawing and what's the status? They would send us a picture, something like this. It was very interesting, very interesting experience doing a fast forward project. And basically in this project, I became a lead architect and I was basically engaged in almost all design packages, from the facade to the interior, to the GRC podium, to the redesigning the amphitheater, feature amphitheater. But apart from that side, I think if I'm going to talk about myself, I have this unparalleled and unquestionable passion and love for patterns. And I think that I was talking to my mom, a couple of weeks ago, and she kind of told me that when I was a kid, we had this sort of a faceted snake with the white and red, and I used to play with it, like creating different shapes with different colors, like for hours. So I think it came back to my very child sort of child, I don't know what would be the right word, passion to basically play with these things. But just to give you a brief summary of what that is that all phenomenons, everything in our universe, irregardless of the scale and basically the size, or whether they are alive or they have been man-built or in part of the entire nature, we can describe them, we can manifest them, or we can configure them through patterns and geometries. So for example, as you see the Anodelma galaxy, the shape that it has the same shape of this satellite image of this hurricane, or the swarm of the birds versus the schooling of the fishes. And in some cases, for example, with the zebra, we know zebra pattern as a stripe system, but then again, looking at them from a close-up, you can see again, you have that vortex, or you can see the appearance of this Fibonacci pattern. So I'm fascinated by these events, and I'm hoping, and through this research that I've been developing for the past 12 years, I am hoping to kind of enhance the relationship between the man and objects, and also redefining their relationship with their own surrounding is something that I've been working on. And I hope that through the next slides, I would be able to better explain it. So this was one of these art pieces that we got commissioned. So this was the initial concept based on this parametric harmonious grid that deforms. And then within each step, we started to refining this concept and then coming up with a very viable application, which in this case, we chose stone. And we wanted to kind of give it a kind of a residential application, to put it as a decorative wall panels. And through the different types of R&Ds, as you can see, we managed to manufacture 7 of these panels as an art piece. They are all somehow attached. They are somehow attached through this metal mesh wall connected with a neodymium magnet. And as you can see from the initial concept to the execution, how each step we try to kind of blur this boundary between fiction and reality. And recently, I just had this my first solo exhibition. It's called the Symphony of Patterns. And through the set of the artworks that we developed through this R&D and research, we found out many interesting opportunities to explore. So this was our initial concept. We wanted to kind of, through this very harmonic perforation of this surface, we wanted to kind of create a sort of a curtain that when you are far away from it, it has this very you could see your reflection. But then again, through those perforations, when you get close, you would be able to see the other side. Uh, we kind of have this in the Islamic, Iranian, and as well as Indian architecture. And I think in Iran, we call them shabak or mushabbak. I don't know how is it called in Arabic. But again, in the Indian architecture, they call it jali, which is this lattice network. They can do it with marble or stone or even wood. They carve it, and it's kind of it has its in the architectural workflow. It's used in the as a net, kind of harnessing the harshness of the sun. So with the stainless steel panel, 1 millimeter thin, we applied this pattern into it, and it come off our design scenarios come off quite nice and very interesting. You have both the grid that it has its own formation, as well as the reflectivity that kind of deforms the perspective around you, giving you this sort of a pseudo interstellar, the moment that he kind of the nexus point going through the wormhole, it gives you that sort of a feeling. And we realized that so there is both the pattern itself and the reflectivity of the object. It could basically enhance the mood of the atmosphere. And we have a very important part, which is the relationship between the light and the shadow. So through these very interesting features, we started to kind of basically redefining our perception of, are we going to use it as a shade, or are we going to use it as a light feature? Because during the day it has one effect, and during the night, as you can see, it has this very, depending on the relationship between the distances and proportions between the light source and the perforated surface, and the plane that the shadows or the light is cast. You can see that we have this very interesting manifestation of this pattern. And since, again, our basic components here are mathematics, grids, deformations, there is an unlimited number of possibilities that we could explore. And these are some, I'm just going through, fast forward through these slides. And in some cases, we could use and mix one feature with another. So here I wanted to use this perforated feature as a komorebi effect, which is in Japanese is the light effect that when you are the light that goes through the leaves of in a forest when you are walking. So I wanted to recreate that with the steel. We realized that it won't work properly because due to the very high temperature that is CNC'd on a stainless steel, it would be very difficult to make it straight. So we changed the materiality into wood, which will give a more warm feeling. And as you can see, due to the fabrication technique, because of this CNC, the patterns at the shadows at the center are very sharp. And by the time they are getting smaller and through this random reduce algorithm, they look like a pomegranate egg seeds. It has this from a very sharp shadow into the soft shadow. And it has this this pattern has a very mesmerizing effect on the eye, very pleasing to look at. And during the night, when you are putting the light source at the bottom, it will give you this very dynamic. Unfortunately, I don't have the video But once you play with the light source, depending on which region of this grid is illuminated, it has this very dynamic, fluid, and alive sort of pattern that moves around. And depending on which plane that you are projecting it, it has this very nice reflection of the shadow with the positive and negative spaces. This one is also another example that we wanted to play with patterns. This time we wanted to make, we wanted to create these stone centerpieces as an art piece, but again, using the same concept of the patterns, and as well as, again, because we are using this digital technology and digital mentality of, or let's say digital exploration of objects, because there is no limitation in the virtual world, we wanted to add this mass customization on mass production in order to give individuality for each and every object. So as you can see, these are our second alternatives for those stone centerpieces. And as you can see, like a face-off in the automotive industry on the main body. Here we kind of use the same mentality. These are our initial sketches, and then how we basically made them out of marble. And again, we don't just challenge ourselves into just basically just because we have this digital technology to make it. We also wanted to add, we want to challenge the material. So as you can see here, this is a 110 centimeter wide length of the stone plate. And at the very corner here, it's only 3 millimeters. So through this exploration of formal exploration and material exploration, we even challenge the material itself, not only again moving from stone into the wood, and then to kind of see the differences and different touches and different textures, what sort of a feeling that it would give you, how different geometries and forms, it will give you the sort of appreciation of your surrounding. These are again different types of design, but with different materials. And the very interesting part about this sort of objet d'art object is that they can be, again, not only they can be mix and match with different objects, and they can furnish the entire, furnish the building, but also they have this sort of individuality within of each of these profile, in a sense that these art pieces can be reconfigured and can be personalized by each person, depending on which formation or arrangement that you want to put them together. Some other examples, and even in this picture, this is an 18, almost 90 centimeter centerpiece. And because we put the main structure, main base point at the very end, you can see that how it can be cantilevered. More than half of its length can be cantilevered. Now, as I said before, because our base, like anything in nature, that geometry make itself presence everywhere, we don't limit ourselves within in one discipline. Either it could be art with no specific function, or it can be design with a very specific function. So the pattern, this is a clutch bag, and we already make it commercial. Hopefully in 2 months, in the next 2 months, it would be first marketed in Iran for the first time. It would be a leather bag, but talking about the design itself, it comprises of a very typical origami pattern, which is called glide reflection. And by manipulating these patterns, by understanding that how different vertices or edges or parts of this design system can be manipulated in order to create different forms. So this one also was one of our first prototypes. It's an organic leather 2-layer that is, and they are laminated by 0.1 millimeter perforated stainless steel sheet. in order to give this very high definition clutch bag. And as you can see, the star pattern morph itself as an abstract apparatus here. And again, not only that, but again, through the different configuration of these components with each other, we can have different types of bags. So it could be clutch, it could get it bit bigger, it could be a carry bag. And this is also another example of this exploration that through these workshops, I also wanted to mention that since 2011, I started doing this personal research through academic workshops, working with different institutes and universities. For example, Hertfordshire University, Ravensburn in Barcelona, IaaC in Italy, in Romania, and also through this online platform, and of course in Iran. We have done more than 20 workshops, working with more than 500 people throughout these years. Each person, because they have different understanding of these patterns, different comprehension of these patterns, they bring in their own individuality into them. So, and it's very, very interesting. For example, the person that was designing the bag, basically the bag typology come out of it, designed the same dress. So as you can see, the star pattern, it kind of starts to get more crystallized at the corner. And once it is turned around, you can see the blending or the fractals that is wrapping around, giving it a sort of a very unique design unity to the overall dress. And now I also wanted to mention that this design system is so interesting, and it was so cool that I talked to Patrick when I was in Zaha. I wanted to teach at AA, but they told me that because I haven't studied there, it would be very difficult. But Patrick said, let me talk to Zaha, maybe we could do something. And basically in the summer of 2015, myself and my colleague Stefano Paiocchi, standing here, we conducted a workshop at Zaha Hadid office in London. And we also had Patrick as our design review. And actually Zaha liked it so much that she allowed that the final pieces, even though they were just folded papers, to be exhibited at the permanent Zaha Hadid Gallery in London for 6 weeks. So these are the results of the students' work. And that also got us into this opportunity to design a dress for Zaha. So myself and Stefano, we were very excited to do this because this was not part of our daily work, because being engaged as a project, this was something to do especially for Zaha. So we started doing this very meticulous research on minimal surfaces. And one thing that got our attention was this gyroid pattern. And through this mathematical deformation of this pattern, we kind of make these shapes, even though it looks like is a very, very complex, and through this deformation, as if this it's not a pattern itself, and each and every part has been kind of sculpted uniquely. But I can assure you that it comes from a typical gyroid pattern. And unfortunately, when we wanted to take Zaha's dimension in 2016-15, she passed away. But 3 months later, there was this fashion show in Gallery Mason-Son in Soho, London. This piece was exhibited, as you can see, with a swimsuit of Zaha, and also we got published at Icon magazine. And in that exhibition, there was a Stephen King's and Stephen Jones and Iris van Harpen. These are some our recent photo shoot with the bag and this abstract apparatus. And we even kind of as a multidisciplinary design firm, we kind of engage with the fashion design. So this is our, as you can see, it's a jumpsuit. And we kind of try to extend our design vocabulary into different parts. So we started exploring these geometrical forms, trying to make them into something more specific in terms of performance and function. And through these various design stages and collaboration with the manufacturer, we kind of rationalize it into this form. And actually, right now, this design, this L-shaped sofa with the low table are being basically, we are doing the value engineering and they're doing the shop drawings right now. And hopefully they will be built in the next 2 months. Some other examples from some design sketches. I can also mention that sometimes the sketches that we do, it gets, so we make it as a conversation starter. We design something and then we let it be, in a sense that either we find someone, either we build it ourselves and then put it in a gallery, we try to sell it, or we through these different types of marketing system. But the most important part is that we just keep just keep generating ideas, and then we will wait for the right moment and the right conversation to arise. And then we somehow re-engage that conversation, try to basically push it to get closer to the reality. Some of our recent design repertoires. Again, this is another example of this corner. These are the details for the corner of the table. And as you can see, how we are, by manipulating the profile of the table, of this table, we are trying to give it more individualistic look. And this was actually, this is my working table. I made it with a friend of mine in London, Alexander Neller in London, with oak wood, very, very stiff, and using this Japanese, this Japanese joinery. It still works. And it gives a very, and as you can see, it gives you a very pure form. Everything is connected. Like the name of this design series are called Waterfall. It's like a fluid state of water that actually it flows vertical, and then it goes, suddenly it changes shape, it changes direction, it transforms or morphs into a waterfall. This was another example of manipulating of, basically this was a research on origami patterns. So this chair, this lounge chair, is an amalgamation of chevron pattern mixed with the star pattern, which hopefully I will show it in the next slides. Another example of our design mentality, we were given this commission to design an art piece or a lectern for a book stand for a lobby. And we kind of dissect the entire system into 4 parts, like by profile, the crown, inner shell, and the outer shell. And as you can see, for each and every part, we started creating these subcategories. And as you can see, for example, you can say, I want to choose profile 1, but I want to use core 105 with a shell profile 103. And as you can see, through this combination of these alternatives, we created a design system with more than 4,700 alternatives, variations. And the client actually, at the first step, they wanted to do, we did it step by step. So the first step, they selected the outer shell. So we gave them the second alternatives for the inner core. And then at the end, we build this, that it looks like that. And it sits in the lobby of this very luxurious building in the north of Tehran. Another example of this design mentality, this is a work of one of my, not recent, but 2019 workshop. This high-rise tower, the entire building compartments, from the massing to the facade to the interior, to the landscape, to the roof garden, everything is coming from a typical triangle. So through this bottom-up research, and as you can see, for example, in this example, the top edge of the second, on the top prism, triangular prism is extended, kind of creating this canopy effect. And they, by creating a secondary system of this overlapping and intersecting of these things, we created it into a facade system. And then this is the site creating the primary grid, which comprises of these triangles, creating this, the plot boundary, the setback, and the building footprint, extruding the entire mass, carving it in order to get the entire GFA, and creating this mega atrium from the bottom to the top, creating this welcoming effect here, like a Mukarnas, having these stepping internal balconies and stepping external balconies, and then using the same mentality, creating the facade system based on the same grid that there is, highlighting the zones that is going to be affected on, creating this very simple pleating effect, but all equal, and then giving it a sort of a harmonic or parametric touch into 8 steps. So every IGU, which is the facade curtain wall, comes out of these 8 variations. And then again, using the same mentality, mixing the 2 triangles makes it into a rhomboid, having the landscape based on that, and then applying it on the rooftop. And then using again the same pleating effect for the internal facade by basically not only it will, because of all this faceting, it will act as a sound absorbing effect, which is going to make it more quieter. But at the same time, you can have this internal glazing part, like this mega atrium, to basically be able to see the internal dynamism of this mega structure building. And this is how it looks like, adding all the parts. And as you can see, the extruded balcony, the extruded or pleated terraces, they are acting as a self-shading mass, which is very, very sort of performative or functional use, in a sense that because Iran has we are in a very hot and dry climate. So using shade as a main element to cool the building, it could basically be very, very beneficial in order to have a less energy impact on the building itself. So these are some renders that as you can see, how the facade will look like and how the balconies, this pleating transformed as a facade system, and the facade system becomes like a deep facade, again becomes a terrace. One of our other architectural projects, this is actually my first architectural competition that I participated ever since I left Zaha. It was a mixed-use building in the southeast of Tehran, and the main concern of the client was that each unit should have its own terrace, which actually is a very, very good thing. To be, as you might know, during the pandemic, during the quarantine time, basically being kind of captivated or caged inside the building can be very, very frustrating. So having a permanent place that connects you to the city, it could be very, very, let's say, humane move in architecture. In terms of our conceptual design, getting inspired by the Iranian and Islamic architecture and calligraphy and the climate and topography, we use these elements not just by its shape, by its meaning and its narrative, by mixing these things together, trying to recreate it as a facade system. This was our proposal. A GRC, the material that we proposed was GRC. Everything is panelized in order to reduce the cost. But the most important was how we kind of read the building. It is very, very important that we make the building so pleasant, not like an art piece, but as a pleasing, as a public art, so that it could be appreciated by the not only the inhabitants, but also the way that it connects to its context and to the city. So this stepping effect kind of resembles like a waves of the ocean. And again, if you're looking at it vertically, it gives you this very nice, captivating surfing through the waves. And again, reading it, you see that, how childs they start to read patterns. And then you know that humans are pattern seekers. We try to, by looking at for example, fractals in the nature, just by looking at the picture of flowers, it will kind of suits us. It kind of relaxes us. And in some researches, I've read some article that in US they are using these techniques to reduce to diminish the amount of stress. So as you can see throughout this formation, it kind of resembles like this petal formation. And one of our unique design statement here was that all design elements, irregardless of their scale and their function, it has to follow the same design language of the facade so that it could create a very strong design unity between all building elements, from the patterns on the carpet to the flower holders or even the wall mounted pots and the furniture. We even actually designed because as I said, it was a mixed use building at the ground floor. We were told to design this co-working area. So we even designed the furniture, the workstations based on the design concept that we have at the very beginning. And these are some renders from the lounge, the ground floor lounge. We even had this very, let's say, I don't know whether to call it passion or this OCD that we wanted to make everything united in a sense. We even designed the bathroom, even the basin. We wanted to make sure that once you are entered the building, it gives you it's not not the facade itself that it should give meaning, but the entire experience of the user or the inhabitants. It has to give you that feeling that you belong there. So even for the sauna and the spa lounge, we designed these stations in such a way that, again, they resemble to the entire design concept of the building. And this actually we proposed, this also is very interesting topic to talk about. You know that the capital cities are now rising, the population is rising, and the price of land is increasing. So we are now talking about this macro housing and macro apartments or macro flats. So the client actually, for some of like 50% of the GFA of the entire massing for this project was allocated for this macro housing. So after going through a couple of options, we realized that if we just try to put these partitions, we are just going to limit the inhabitant or the person movement inside that space. So we come up with this idea in such a sense that it could, like the entire building, the entire house interiors, it could basically be compacted into this add-on system that through these rails. For example, right now, this is the workstation, let's say, mode, in which that you can use the balcony as well as basically extend it towards your workstation. And during the night, you can see that it could be moved and it can it can transform into this morphe bed. So you could basically get like 70 meter square performance out of a 50 square meter flat. And you don't need to have these walls and doors to limit you through that very, very small or macro apartment. And this is also another exterior rendering. Our recent competition that we participated was in the north of Iran. It was close to the Caspian Sea, and our initial idea was that how can when you are inside the building, it could transcend your experience as if that you are experiencing it inside the yacht. So this was our based on that concept. So we created a wrapping balcony around the entire mass. So as you can see, it has this small delays. Yes. So trying to kind of resemble the design based on the experience on the water sport and the water activity experiences, we creating this wrapping balcony that it could, first of all, because this is a siesta house, or basically this is a vacation house, not a permanent house. It will give you the access throughout the building, and basically you could have the same effect as if you are enjoying it inside the yacht. So based on that, we basically from outside to inside, we started basically designing the building to kind of enhance or kind of get you closer to that mentality. So this would be a close-up view. And as you can see through this, like an uninterrupted, more than 180-degree panoramic view, you can be able to access throughout all of these buildings. And from an environmental standpoint, basically it won't, because there are some very not harsh but moderate west wind that basically hits the building. But again, throughout this system, it can basically, the wind can go through without creating any sort of a semi-tornadoes inside. And then again, for the communal areas, we designed, apart from the furniture, which are very iconic, but apart from that, all the design elements from the interior to the exterior, we designed it ourselves, because we believe that with these new technologies available to us, we should be able to basically engage in all and every design disciplines and to give it a very our architectural charisma into the building. Now, moving forward, I want to talk about the second, again, another part of my professional life, which is for the past 12 years, I have been working on patterns and again, how we could transform them, how we could apply them in a multidisciplinary design system. It's very academic. It's something that I learned in Barcelona. Was very, very difficult compared to bottom-up. Compared to the top-down design approach. Here I'm going to show you some slides, and I hope that I will make it understandable. So for example, if I tell you about origami, and if you just Google it, you can see that it is represented as a paper folding craft, which, as you can see by the picture, is sort of a child's play. But the way that I see it, it's more sophisticated. It's very, very sophisticated, and it can be used as a design system more seriously. So looking at this picture, this is a typical chevron pattern, or M pleat or V pleat, depending on V or M, depending on how you look at it. So as you can see, it's a flat piece of paper with these two types of lines, or mountain and valley. You can see them by color. So it's kind of like binary 0 and 1. So the relationship between these two lines, or these 1 and 0s, it will give you this 3D manifestation of the hand folded model. Now imagine that, for example, this vertical edge here, this vertical edge. What will happen if I take it and I start widening it? So it becomes like this. So I just did this very, very simple, basically manipulation, and suddenly it starts to change like that. So what will happen if I give it a bit more effect? So it starts to widening it. So as you can see, it starts to kind of distance itself. It could start to generate, it starts to appear as if it's a totally new pattern. It's like that. So if I had shown you this picture at the very beginning, and I would have told you, this is just a typical chevron pattern, only be in every other vertical edges, I just widening it. You wouldn't believe, you would be like, no, this is a totally new, very sophisticated. I'm going to give you another example. So this one is a typical digrid pattern or diagonal grid pattern. And as you can see, visually, you will read it in an X like that. But then again, what will happen if I start to widening these vertical edges? It starts to become, it's still very, it has this digridy look, but it starts to transform more into hexagons. And you can see that the degree of that X, it starts to become more vertical. It starts to become, and then the readability of the pattern, you no longer see it. You no longer read it as an X or as a diagonal system, but you are seeing it as a vertical stripe system. So you can see that by changing one parameter, how it could basically, depending on, I'm not talking about how the curvature or the geometrical behavior will change. I'm just talking about the readability of the pattern here. So as you can see, through one very simple effect, you can have a very extreme outcome. Now imagine that 12 years in each of these, like more than 12, more than 25 or 6 workshops, working with different patterns. And then each student, they will bring their own kind of sort of understanding of geometry, how many of these patterns that can be generated. And I hope that in the next couple of years, I will compile these this amount of work into a book as like a geometrical dictionary for these patterns. So as you can see, for example, I'm going to actually show you one of them. For example, this one. Let me just zoom in. So what will happen, again, as you can see, this is a very, we are very curious and we are having this research vibe, like what will happen if you start to widen these vertical edges to the corner. So as you can see, it starts to form like this. These two gets wider and this one in the center, it starts to get very tighter. And at the end, it will look exactly like this. So, and then when you give the students, once they, because when they are, when you are modeling it in Rhino, in AutoCAD, or in any digital platform, you are basically modeling it in an X and Y like a mouse, and you are seeing it in a monitor. But when you are starting to build it, you fold it by hand, your understanding of the pattern will enhance dramatically because now you are using your muscle and your brain to understand that, okay, this has to go up, this has to go down. So through this sort of both digital and manual exercise, your understanding will be enhanced drastically. And then throughout each steps, you start to making more drastic, more complex shapes and patterns. And then when you are compiling them, when you are laying them, you are laying out them in this very high precision-wise matrix, it will give you a very good outlook of how this pattern would work on a typical component. You have one person, whoever that works on that specific pattern, will deepen their knowledge about it. But then again, as I said, you're working on just a typical component. But on the second stage, now that you have understood that on a single component, how it will look, now you will try to, again, raise the odds. Say that, okay, what will happen if we put 4 of them together, or we use it, or in this system, we call it growth system, type linear. So for example, in these 3 designs, as you can see, the primary grid, the blue line, they are all the same. The blue line stays the same. The only difference here is this red or magenta line that, for example, in this one is just a typical horizontal line. In this one, it transforms from the upper arrow to the mirrored lower arrow here. And in this one, all the arrows have been rotated anti-clockwise. But then again, you see that even though the primary grid is the same, but the secondary grid, how it will make it totally different and how you can start to make it into design systems. Again, these are some other examples using fractals, mixing fractals with this sort of manipulating the prime grid into deforming. And in some cases like this, how one system, which is this one, this bottom at the right part, by just shifting and rotating, it will give you this kind of a pseudo non-repetitive tessellations. And then again, we have this visual language that explains how the system would work. For example, here you see a typical digrid. It has been fractally subdivided, and how the fractals in this way linear it works, and how we are making the mirror. This thing has been mirrored. Again, some other examples working with different patterns. And actually, this one is actually one of my favorites. For example, you see the difference between 1 and 2. So you see, again, almost the primary grid is the same, but again, the arrows that you are playing with within each digrid, it goes like a zigzag. But then again, this zigzag, once you start to read it as a whole, you see that it gives you this, even though it's a digrid system, but because of those zigzag arrows, it will give you this hexagonal grid formation. And that is exactly the moment. This is actually what we are searching for, trying to understand how each of these systems, how through this manipulation, playing with the primary grid and the secondary grid, how this very simple act could have a very drastic outcome. And again, for example, in the industrial design, you see that this is a typical chevron pattern, and that has been mixed with the, you see here is the morphing of the chevron pattern with the star pattern. You see that we started with 4V, and it morphs into 2. And by mixing these two, we started to get this sort of a shape that looks like a seat. And this is what the students, they developed during the 2-week workshop. But then again, because everything is connected by a flat piece of paper, you have certain limitations. So what do we do at this stage? We said that forget about the paper. Now that you have come to this stage in which that you can basically have your design visualized, or it could give you this visual cue like a chair. Now it starts to rationalize it in such a way, give it a proper dimension in different orthographic views and isometric. Try to use all the effects that you have learned in the previous stages. For example, you see here, this one is a typical chevron pattern. Here is where those morphing of the chevron and the star, it gives this shape, and then dramatizing the effect to make it more big, and then basically just add more, basically you could, just like an evolutionary design system, you could start to add more pieces into it in such a way that basically by the end of 3 weeks, this group, they develop over 200 repertoires. And this was back in the 2020, where there was no ChatGPT or Midjourney that you would be able to generate such designs. And this is a very good example how you see from a very simple topology, it morphs into a different typology of the chair and becomes like this. Now, since for this workshop, we got a sponsor that they told us that they will build these, and we were basically had to take it more seriously, because this has to become, you know, that after our clothes, the very object that we have our most contact is the furniture. We may sit on a chair more than 12 to 15 hours. I mean, a modern citizen that works in an office environment, basically, this is the amount of connections that we are talking about. So our first part was that, okay, if you're going to make the armrest detached from the rest of the chair body, lounge body, so we started doing the structural analysis of it, and we realized that because of this detachment, it will have this very annoying and uncomfortable vibration up to 10 seconds. So what we said was, okay, we have two options. Either we have to increase the thickness of the metal, because we wanted to make it out of metal sheet, which will make this lounge chair very, very heavy, or we have to change the design, modify the design, which in fact actually kind of brings back the whole, again, the morphing of the chevron pattern into a star pattern. And actually that worked, And on the second stage, by looking into the very, let's say that the icon furniture of the 20th century, we started to rationalize the design in such a way that not only to ease to facilitate the fabrication process, to make the shop drawings, but as well as to, again, make sure that we, in terms of the ergonomy and the anthropometry, we get closer. So we made a mock-up. We asked men and women, different ages and different height, to sit on this part, and we took this. We kind of gathered and extract data of their feelings, like how close they are to the ground, if they can do cross-leg easy, what should be the height of the headrest and the backrest, how it should be, and then again applying the local data into our primary data. So as you can see, we started from a very let's say that non-performative academic research on a typical pattern. We extract some information. We said that we recognize it as a chair. Now that it's a chair, we have to apply the protocol and the standards of that design discipline. And while doing that, we are adding another layer of local, let's say that users of this chair. And then at the end, making sure that the design parts are in such a way that it could be built based on the available material, which is here was just a metal sheet, by folding and welding the parts. And because everything has already been rationalized previously, it only took 3 hours to go to basically, after folding and CNCing the parts, it only took 3 hours to assemble it. And this was me testing it, and it's very, very comfortable, even though it looks like a spaceship, or it looks like the Star Wars Lord Vader kind of a seat. Because we use those, again, we localize the dimension based on the Iranian people typical height, it's very, very comfortable. And by coating it with the oven powder, it kind of gives it like a folded leathery look. And that's how it looks like. It has a very strong presence in every place that you put it. Moving forward, again, using the same mentality for the fashion, transforming, again, using this very initial steps at the component stage, road system, making them into this system to become like a bag. And then out of these we could create different alternatives, basically by manipulating the prime pattern, making sure that which part overlaps, which parts basically has to basically sit edge and edge on each other. And as you can see, there are unlimited number of alternatives that you can create. But during this exercise, we actually managed to have more than 40 bags. Our last part, which is about architecture. After 6 years of working with papers and folding and fashion, I started to basically wanted to see that if I would be able to apply this concept into architecture. I'm going to give you one very typical example, and I hope that it would make it very easy to understand. So this time, rather than just working with the pattern, regardless of the style, scale, we start to make it anthrocentric, to basically humanize it, putting a human figure inside the pattern. And as you can see here, we are making the top and bottom surface, one of them going clockwise, rotated clockwise, the other one counterclockwise. And as you can see, the rectangle starts to transform into an X, but which is very typical, which is the repercussion of this act. But architecturally speaking, what will happen here is that you see this zone, the blue zone is where you have the floor and you have the ceiling on top. The zone that is magenta is that you have the floor, but there is no ceiling on the top. The part that is green is that there is no floor, you have the ceiling on top of you. And in the part that is red, you have neither the floor, neither the ceiling. So it's very important that when you are doing this geometrical manipulation, from which discipline you start to analyze it. So having that in mind, the students, they started to do this geometrical exploration. They made their, even from the mass of the building, doing again, the same standards and protocol for designing a building, doing the solar analysis, doing the wind analysis, making all the facade compartments all panelized based on the available technology that is there. And these are the results of the students' work after a 1 year collaboration. And I think I am almost done. Thank you very much. I hope that I didn't go more than 40 minutes.
No, it's fine. It is an hour now, but it
Oh,
was
I apologize.
very fabulous experience actually, and experiments and research. And actually, this takes us to very important question. Uh, how now, let's say, how your perception, understanding now being, let's say, formed, and let's take it that way. We need to know how the understanding all these modularities and materials, such the origami, helps you now in the perception of design and designing new projects. So let's compare it 10 years ago, before you dive in all these modularities understanding, and how now you are uh, understanding them and working with them. How's the approach for you actually started being different?
Well, when I was in India and I was doing my bachelor's, and even in my first year in IaaC, we were doing a very top-down approach. In top-down
Mm,
approach is that, for example, as a design course, they tell you you need to design an architect's house. This is the typical, I think, for the past 50 years in Iran, it works that way. So they give you a site, they give you the statement or the requirement or the project brief, and you have to abide those brief, and you start from the mass of the building and you start to detail it. So this was the approach that I used to have until my second, and even in Zaha is the same, because, for example, when they ask you to design a train station, basically 70% of the space are MEPs, or technical issues, or there are technical equipments. You
mm,
have only less than 30% of the area to make it work.
mm,
But then again, this research, there are two different worlds that I try to, again, I try to, even though I try to keep them separate, they have to be separate, because top down is very practical. It is how you do practice with. But bottom up, it's something that is experimental. You don't know the product. You don't know what you are going to get at. You just do this research. For example, you see at the very beginning of those slides, I started by applying pattern on a shade. And then once I make the mock-ups, some other mysteries unfold, like, okay, now you can do light, you can do art, you can do, I don't know, different parts, different sites, or so I try to keep them separate, but of course there are bridges in between, in a
mm,
sense that this research that we do, for example, right now that I created those bags, I'm sure that I can make them, for example, I can use the same mentality and break them into furniture. And I can use those furniture in the inside of these buildings that we do. So it's a kind of like a water and oil, but at the same time, sometimes they mix, even though they have to be detached. Because if a client comes to me and says that I need you to design a villa for me, and at the end of it, I said, no, no, wait, Mr. X, you don't need a villa. Here is a nice bag that I'm giving you because I started with this and now it's a bag.
yeah,
But then
actually,
again, they can be related. Yes.
yeah, and actually, this is my next question. How do you see your role as multidisciplinary designer evolving the next few years?
Um, Can you repeat the question? Sorry,
Okay.
my role.
How do you see your role as multidisciplinary designer evolving in the next
Uh-huh.
few years?
It's very, very difficult. We are living in a world that who would have known, like we had this experience like COVID.
Yes.
So it would be very difficult to know. And I think that this is also one of the adventures that I don't know. Because many people ask me that, why after 8 years you left Zaha? And I said, because of this, because in Zaha, I would know, not that we are doing, in Zaha, we were doing extraordinary, um, I don't know what would be the word, magnificent, magnum opus, like a one of a kind, unique set of projects there, but it is still like a business. It's a business that you get a commission or a competition, and you have to deliver. But with this, what I do here, it's like I have my own small lab, sometimes working with students, sometimes working with people that they want to basically, the interns. You don't know what will happen. And that kind of not knowing give me the drive that maybe in the next year, for example, right now, I hope that in the next 2 months, that bag will come to the market. And then we see, because I'm not a fashion designer, I never was. I just collaborated on a design system that it became into this. So who knows what will happen? Either it becomes a commercial success and I will have to engage more in that, or one of these other artworks that will
Yes.
basically, I will find a business for it.
Mm.
So who knows? But at the spot, to be honest, I would love to basically be able to experimentation and exploring is the passion. I hope that I would stay in that same state. I won't become like a IKEA style that everyone would come and buy stuff. I could
Modular.
create something. Yes.
Yeah. Well, let's say technology now actually helps us utilize materials and create different modularities that we couldn't do before 20 years ago, let's say.
Mhm.
And what advice would you give to other architects looking to incorporate advanced computational design and multidisciplinary approaches on their practice?
Um, my advice would be the thing is that to start from the very, very beginning. In order to become a designer, you first have to see. You need to use your eyes. You go to museums, go to art museums, read as many books with pictures. Try to see as many as items as possible. Try to see beautiful things. And from my side, I started to analyze and dissect everything around me geometrically because at the end of the day you have by manipulation of this geometry you are making something because and then it about the second part would be that so what would be your approach? For example, me is the geometry mixing with patterns and then now applying lights and some basically adding more ingredients into it. So at the very beginning, I start by seeing what other people, what different nations and civilization have done, so that you would be able to find your own touch, your own signature, how you can add values into your own product, whether it's a building or an object, it doesn't matter. Just again, you have this technology, amazing technology that can help you, but don't let this technology make decisions for you. It's a totally different thing. You, at the end of the day, you should be on top of you should have full control of your form, of your outcome. These tools are only extension of your body that can help you achieve that goal. But if you are, and obviously you saw the work that I've done, I'm also a computational designer, but I never allow a computer to decide for me. I seek meaning through manipulation of those things, and I try to basically put my idea there, not to
Mm.
basically say that, okay, these are the features of this software, and I have to obey them. This is actually something that even in Zaha we used to do. For example, in KFD, we make plugins. We made the technology into our own will. We were not waiting for these computer scientists to tell us what to do. We have to basically initiate.
Last question from Dr. Abdel Fattah. Are there recent projects or evolving mudstone that have been utilized, and will this application of artificial intelligence and rethinking modality accelerate the production of these products such as mud and stone, and open multiple avenues for clear advanced thinking and architectural development?
The last, I think, in terms of the mud and earth, let's say, material, I think there was this American-Iranian fellow called Nader Khalili that developed this super Adobe concept that through these plastic bags, you would basically put this earth or, yes, you put not mud, and create these structures that are very self-sustainable in terms of not basically disrupting the environment in that sense. But again, with applying it with artificial intelligence, I think artificial intelligence are at the very, very beginning of its stage. We don't know the outcome yet. I don't think it has yet reached its place. It's at the very beginning. It's just actually, I was talking with some Zaha people, some of my old colleagues about it. Artificial intelligence at this stage is very like a resonance of the past. You can still understand that, okay, what was the reference image? And I don't think that it's something that we would like, because we are more creative than this. So it is still evolving. But in regard of basically doing mud and stone, maybe, for example, I can see that there is this new technology with 3D printing, and they are doing it with mud and concrete. With the stone, it will be very difficult to do because stone is still very hard, and you require very specific tools to cut it and to manipulate it. But with this technology, with this 3D printing, I think there is a very interesting advantage to do that, to kind of revive vernacular architecture in a modern narrative, not just repeating ourselves. Yes, there is thinking to that, obviously, and I hope that, for example, in the rural area, rather than working with this very bad quality of concrete and stone, we would actually work with the very local material, using the technology properly to kind of have a less impact on our planet. I hope that I managed to answer the question.
Thank you again, Architect Rian, for
Yes.
being with us today. It was very inspiring talk, and looking forward
Thank
to
you very
seeing
much.
you in Riyadh, maybe.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And again, apologies that it went a bit too long, but it was
No, not
12
at
years
all.
of work combined.
Well,
Thank you
very
very
pleasure.
much,
Thank you.
guys, and
Take care.
enjoy the rest of the day.
You
Bye.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.